looks the same.
Like, given, like in a 6-month period, you don't have a sense of what the next 6-month period will look like. It is a very, like being part of the gig economy or being somebody who's cobbling a career and a life together.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily always know what the next quarter will look like. How much out do you typically know?
No, I know what's happening till the end of August, till we close the show, and then I have no idea. And I'll have a couple of little gigs kind of sporadically, and I think as I get older too, and I want to hone in on how do I want to spend the second half of my life, I spend a lot of time thinking about the impact I want to make, or where is that perfect Venn diagram of what you're good at, what the world needs, and what's sustainable. Where's that little perfect spot in the center? And for me, part of the arts is about sort of unraveling that mystery of what it means to be a human being, and then sort of filtering it through your own experience and having conversations. But the biggest thing for me in all of the work I've ever done is about human connection and the importance of that, of we are these random humans bumping up against each other as we walk the planet together, and what is that kinetic magic that happens when we bump up, and what is that gives it more meaning. And the projects I like to do, both in work and volunteer, have something to do with that, and that thing that you can't really put your finger on but gives your life meaning.
If in that Venn diagram you could pick the one thing you wanted to do the most of all of the hats, is there one? Is there one that you wish you could make the money at?
If I could, I just love, what I loved about documentary was I think people are so interesting. And if I could be like Oprah's job, where I just get to listen to interesting people all day, that would be perfect. Like a podcast where I'm like, tell me everything. And sometimes I'm like, well, my boyfriend Jay will attest to this. We will be anywhere, and I'm like, this person, I was just in the cab with this person. Anyway, they're coming over for dinner. They're so fascinating. I can't help it. They're just so interesting.
My husband is shaking his head because this is, right? I do the exact same thing. I am a student of the human condition.
Yeah, and I go deep fast. Like, there's no small talk.
Deep fast.
Yes.
Wait, that sounded weird when I said
Yeah.
Anyways, I want to ask you about, as a writer, I have so many questions for you. It's always weird to interview somebody you know really well. Which ones? But as a writer, were you writing as a kid, or do you remember your writing, tell us about your writing journey.
Yes. I thought that I was Anne of Green Gables when I was a kid. Like your book, Anne of Green Bagels. I just thought I was. I thought Lucy Maud understood me, and I was the Lady of Shalott. So everything was sort of that for me. I wrote a diary from the time I was nothing. And it was always sort of writing, even when I read them back, I always sign it Love Megan, which is hysterical, because who am I writing this to except myself? So there was always this kind of trying to figure out what life was about and my experiences were about, and documenting things. And I loved writing stories as a young person, but it never occurred to me that I could be a writer. And my Aunt Anne, who's here, told me in my 20s I should be a writer, and I was like, I don't know. That seems hard. And it is, but I love it, and I love the way I've always loved when you read something great and it just feels good in your mouth, and sometimes you have to read it again. It's like, how did you describe that so perfectly? And you encapsulated this, great writers who can encapsulate a human experience. Like, oh God, I love it. And my dad was a wordsmith, and he used to challenge us. I remember having a whole bunch of girlfriends over, maybe grade 8, and he came into the kitchen and he put $10 down on the table, and he said, this is to the the last person standing who doesn't use the word like. Well, every sentence was
He was listening from the other room. I was making him crazy.
And he was like, I can't handle it. So we grew up in a house that had an appreciation for words and language and find a good way to express yourself. And as I've aged and starting to think about wanting to, how do you take all the thoughts in your head and try to succinctly put them down in a way someone else might understand? And in a way that isn't 15 seconds on Instagram or videos that keep going. It's something that takes time to it's tangible and takes time to read it, and there feels again like some kind of connection with people when you do that.
So those stories, those take time stories that you now write, I know you, did you think they started as prose? I know you've been published in Reader's Digest, right? Mm-hmm. Were they prose pieces that you didn't think you would ever speak out and act? Or tell me about the stories that, I want to talk more about Veranda Society and some of how that work has evolved, but I want to know about those stories that you write.
Yeah, no, I didn't think I'd speak them out loud. But when I read them back, it has my voice, which is funny. And when you have to edit for, like, Reader's Digest, for example, by the time it goes out, you're like, it's sort of my story. Like, it is your story, but they've taken your little nuances, your mechanisms out. You're like, all right, fine, it's more palatable, that's fine. But I think it started, the writing, when it got a bit of traction, was when I did my film, Murphy's Law, and I started a blog, and people responded to the blog a lot. And it was a really personal blog. So my parents had passed away, and I'd ended my engagement, moved back home, really bright light, good year. That was a good year. And
Your parents didn't both die in the same year.
No, they didn't. No, they spread it out
just
for fun.
Yeah.
But we cleaned out my parents' house, and I found a journal that my dad had kept when he was 26. He'd ridden his bike around Ireland, and I found his journal and his bicycle from 1973. So we fixed it up and took his journal and the bike and went back to Ireland and retraced his steps. And so I kept a blog about that, and it resonated with people. And I realized, and at first I felt really exposed about all of this. Like, you're putting your own life out there, and we live in a time when that's particularly challenging, I think, because it's so easy to sort of cancel people, and what if I say the wrong thing, or what if people judge me, and yet on the other side there's something liberating about that, because then your story doesn't own you the same way. It's sort of like an outfit you can take off and look at, but it's not as all-consuming. So the blog picked up, and actually from one of the blog entries, someone at Reader's Digest or Huffington Post saw it and contacted me about writing for them. I thought, okay. And from there, a bunch of my blogs, they kept saying, can we redo this one and publish it? I thought, oh, alrighty then. And there's one I did about Sears closing and my mom, and the sort of intersection of Sears closing and how much it made me grieve again, and walking around looking at girdles, feeling nostalgic. And then you start to realize, like, oh, I'm not a weirdo, because a whole bunch of other people feel like this too. Mm-hmm. And the more you sort of share that stuff, the more you build this sense of community, even in a long distance.
The thing that's interesting about your work is that you seem to tap into the zeitgeist of what, even though your stories are, and I've dramaturged your work, and I've probably talked to you about this, but the specificity, when you get really specific, somehow people can just see themselves reflected. And your work, I think it's part of, it really taps into the zeitgeist, and it's also so specific that we somehow all react to it, or we have a reaction to it. Like, I haven't had this specific thing with the guy with the shooting the Christmas tree to get the top of the tree, but something about your story really lands. Can you think about what it is about your work that lands for us so much?
Well, that's kind of you to say. I think that that's quite an honor to
I think it's just
that.
True.
I think we all like to think we're really unique. And I think growing up I definitely wanted to be. And then you realize there's a great peace in realizing you're not as unique as you think. And you are in many ways, but although our stories are individual, that heartbeat is universal, and that's the thing that makes us sort of less alone on the planet. And I think particularly after my folks died, and you have this really odd feeling of being anchorless, like you're sort of just dropped off on this planet and trying to figure out how to do it all again. And then I would look to everyone to say, like, tell me how you got through this. Tell me how you lived. Don't tell me about how you succeeded in love. Tell me about when it ripped your heart out. Tell me that you survived that. Tell me that life goes on when I can't get over the ringing in my ear. Tell me. And I was so desperate for those lifeboats, and then I realized that I could be that for people sometimes. And I think my film, I realized through doing that, often when I would talk to people after, I wasn't talking to them about my story. It was the pieces of themselves they saw in my story, and we connected where those pieces intersected, and it became a way to heal both of us, if that makes sense. So I think that and I love the idea of just paying attention, like how we live in a time when our attention is just being hijacked all over the place. And when you pay attention to the tiniest moments and those little things between people and the nuances, and you look for the places where there are, where you rub up against each other and can find some common ground. And if I can write about that, I feel like it makes life a little more rich.
Yep. I'm curious because the stories are so autobiographical.
Yeah.
How do you navigate opening yourself up, and then you perform them as well? So how did you make that sort of pact with yourself and us as an audience to do that really confessional work?
I felt like I guess sometimes it's, that idea of do what you know. So you write what you know. I know my own life. I know what I think about that. I feel often like I am not an expert in so many things. I am a total jack of all trades, where I don't really, I'm afraid to be an expert and get called out on that.
Imposter syndrome.
Total imposter syndrome. But at least I'm an expert in my own life for the most part. Even though today I was like, do I even know about this play? Did I write it? I'm not sure. And I think there's an authenticity that I love about, even though when I'm sharing my own work, it's a heightened version of me, like me on a first date, sort of. You get the best version, but there's an authenticity where I don't have to pretend to be someone else. I get to just be me and tell you this truth that I know, and that I hope you see something of yourself in. And I've had people say to me, you can write about other people. And I was like, oh God, should I? Is that what I should do? And I do want to write about other people, and I like filming other people. And but I do think there's stuff in our own lives to mine, and maybe it is that, going back to that little girl who wrote her diary, of I just want to understand my life and my reason for being here, and I want to understand it through other people, and I want to... somehow I want at the end of my life to be like, oh, I got it a little bit more. Somehow. I got used up. For whatever reason I was supposed to be here, I used it up.
I like that. I'm just going to let that one sit just for a second. I like that. I want to know about the first one. Do you remember the first of your stories that you did live in front of an audience? Because Murphy's Law, you were still filming, so it was still... You presented something, but it wasn't like this live. And I'm so curious about when that started.
I think that started in COVID with the Veranda Society.
So that was the first time?
Probably, yeah.
So tell me about that. So I want to know about where, you and Kate got that idea, which is so fabulous and it's changed all of our lives in lots of ways.
Yeah, it's been a real blessing. I think, having reflected, so before my dad passed away, my sisters and I made a cassette tape with him where we recorded him, questions for him about, it's funny, I was looking at it recently, deep things about what we should do with our lives and how do you find the right partner, and then questions like, what's a mortgage? And, and he had said in that too about, what should we be when we grew up? Because he died when I was young, in my early 20s. And he said, I can't say from this position, that I'm not a prophet. I can't tell you what should happen, or I have a feeling you should make a living in the arts. But he said, all of those shows we would go to, like the Stuart McLean's and Hal Holbrook, who would do Mark Twain Tonight, and I remember going to the Hummingbird Center and watching him just knees up, like one man turning into Mark Twain. And he said, maybe you should create something that would have longevity that you could keep pulling out when you needed to. So fast forward to 2020, and I was reading a book called My Town, My Memories by my great uncle Claire Galvin, who was a businessman in town and had been a writer for the Examiner and penned a number of books of short stories. And he wrote a story called The Veranda Society, which was about growing up in the 1930s and when people didn't have telephones and televisions inside, so they would visit each other on their verandas, and houses were built close to the sidewalk to facilitate that. And so we weren't allowed to go anywhere, and I was reading his stories about Peterborough, and then I'd walk to those places and sort of imagine this is the building where this happened, and this shooting in 1935 was here, and I'm trying to picture it all. And then I walked by my great-grandmother's house with the veranda, and I stood there and sort of tried to squint and picture my ancestors on this veranda. And felt a little sad that I hadn't known them all, but I felt like I did. And I wrote about that. And I wrote about how in 2020 we were sort of back to the Veranda Society. We were visiting, we were bored with Netflix, and we were back to visiting outside where we could, anywhere that we could. And it was this lovely resurgence of, something that technology can't do. And from that, Kate Sir and I she's a musician, and I said, what if we did the same idea of the Hal Holbrooks and the Vinyl Cafe, and we wrote stories and songs and we took them to people. And we thought if we got, maybe 5, we'd be doing great. 200 verandas later. Yeah, it's been amazing. I've been to a lot of your verandas, Americans. Yeah, they have lovely homes.
Did you have all the stories all written for it?
No, and a couple I had, and I kept it pretty light. Like it was a 45-minute set, and I did 3 stories and tried to keep it. One was, a little more heartfelt, and the other ones were kind of funny. One was about how I saved Roy Orbison's soul. You're all welcome. And about summer trips, how we couldn't do that anymore, and sort of reflections on our trips that went so wrong as a kid. And then it kind of spiraled, and we did a show on your veranda, and you had this look. She does this look where you're like, does she either hates it or she's getting an idea? And then she said, real? Yeah, you got a thing.
You can't tell because I got Botox inside. You can't tell.
I can't tell how she's feeling, never know. But yeah, and then you approached Kate and I and said, would you consider doing a longer show for the summer of 2021? And because of the improv, I said, yes, and how hard could this be? And it was really hard.
Was it really?
Well, it was hard for sure, because you think, how am I going to come up with that material, and is this good enough? And, is it too self-focused? Is anyone going to see themselves in this? And then it turned out to be wonderful.
It was incredible. Mm-hmm. What you two created was incredible. And I got on the bandwagon late with helping with the residency at the farm, but it felt like such a blessing to dig into your work. And you don't know this, but I have been trying a new way of doing table work at the beginning of rehearsals with Meg and Kate and their work, this thing called the beat work, and it's too long to describe now, but it was the first time. And so our table work for the show was partly getting ready to know the intricacies and what every single thing and it meant, and then because we were working on their songs and stories, it was partly therapy as well.
God, yeah.
It was very fascinating as the first time to do this kind of new work, but I just thought that you really have this ability. First of all, I think you're capturing a town, and I think that's why you're really quite beloved in Peterborough. You have a way of capturing this town, and your love of our town bubbles forth in a lot of your work. And you also have this way of capturing your family. And I know a lot of people probably are writing with their families, and a lot of people journal. And so I think a lot of us really look to your work and think, wow, the way you're capturing them. And you deal with a lot of grief in your work, for sure. You've had a lot of grief with your mom and your dad and your niece. And I say these things because you've done stories about it.
Yeah, there's nothing
in our house, in a lot of our houses, and at the farm. And yet at the same time, incredibly funny.
Right.
How do you balance those two things, Meg?
Well, my therapist would say, I don't.
We went deep, and Dan said really go deep, like really
She would say that the humor is a defense mechanism. I would say it's a survival skill. I think that's where that Irish thing comes in as well. And I think that line of tragedy and comedy, we walk it so finely, and I love it. I love it. Our family has the darkest sense of humor that so many people would probably, oh my gosh.
Be horrified by?
Horrified, but in the best way, I think. Like this story I tell about my dad, he was dying at home, and as we were making this tape, he said, well, girls, I think it's time for me to tell you who's my favorite. All three of us are sitting around, and then he goes, lean in. My favorite is... And he fake died.
On his deathbed.
My dying father fake died for a joke. So that's the family. We were like, good one. You got us. That was good. That's the sort of family I come from. But even in that humor, there is such closeness because we were actually able to talk about real and hard things. And we still have that in my family, which I am incredibly grateful for. And I think it has been a lifeboat, really. And I think there is that feeling, too, of, as a creative, yes, it's personal, but also I want to make good stuff. I love the art form. I have deep respect for a craft and sitting down and doing the work and how do we make this better. And I'm not precious with my work, which is something I love about working with you, because I love cutting things. I love when it doesn't work and you just axe it. I love making it tighter and getting to your point. And sometimes it takes a minute to go, just give me that one for one more day. Like, let me have that paragraph. But then you see that it serves the piece. And if it serves the piece, then it serves the craft, which serves the message, which serves the connection. And so I think humor does that too. So that if you're going into something serious and you can touch on that real humanity, but if you stay there, it's too uncomfortable, and we can't consume everything at once.
Humor's like a pressure cooker. Like relieve a bit of the pressure of it in a pressure cooker, kind of.
Yeah, and it's kind of my terrible analogy, but come with me on it, is like a cow eats, it puts its head down, it just eats.
Okay.
So like you go through hard stuff and you're just in it. But then it digests it over time. Coughs up a little.
So humor's like a number of stomachs?
Trauma is that. Hard things. Grief is that. And then the humor is like, oh, there's a little bit. Ooh, okay. All right. A little indigestion. But you can't look at the whole field at once. It's too big. And so humor gives you that way in and out.
I want to talk a little bit about radio before and so Wild Irish Geese, for a short form in our office, we call it WIG, just so you know. So I'm going to talk about WIG in a minute. But you had this 12-year career in radio.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated by that. And I knew you much younger. So just to let you all know, I tried to get Meg to work at the Fourth Line Theatre in the the early 2000s and could not get her to commit.
I was too scared.
Fancy. But so thrilled we've eventually got you. But then I was living in Toronto and I heard that, oh yeah, Meg Murphy does this like radio show, and then Linda Cash is doing a radio show. I thought, what's going on? All the actors are doing radio shows. It was and Dan Duran. But then I was talking to someone recently, because you talk a little bit about, we know a lot about the Galvin Murphys here in Peterborough, but then you have some allusions in some of your shows to the Mulvihills in Toronto. And I was talking to my friend who works in PR or in advertising. He goes, well, there's like the Paul Mulvihill Award. The Mulvihills are one of the biggest advertising families in the country. Yeah. And I thought, what am I doing? Oh, we got Dr. Ingram. Do you see where he is? Yeah, get with your husband. That's what we do.
They were having a domestic. They sat separated for a while.
They've made that.
They've been texting through the show. It's fine.
But you are from an advertising dynasty.
Yeah.
There's the Paul Mulvihill Humanitarian Award in advertising giving every year. And one of your aunts, she's huge at St. Joseph Media.
Yeah.
So I'm so fascinated on that. So you've got the Murphy Galvin side with the storytelling, but you have it on the other side as well. So had you ever thought about going into advertising? Because I know you write jingles and ditties and all kinds of stuff.
no, I'm terrible at sales. Never hire me for that. No, even when I was doing the United Way campaign and they asked me, I said, I'm the worst person. By the end of a meeting, I'll be like, never mind, I'll write the check. It's okay, I'm so sorry to a lot of you. I can tell your stories, but I am a terrible person. If you come in and close with me, great, but I can't do it. I can't do it. But yeah, my grandfather on my mom's side, he, grade 9 educated, worked at Kresge's, ended up getting married, and he got a job in Timmins working for a little radio station that was just starting by an unknown fella named Roy Thompson. Oh. Yeah, Roy Thompson's first radio station. So my grandfather, they sold one of the platters as their wedding gifts to take a train north. And from there, my grandfather became he had the first boutique radio sales company in Canada. And so they were in Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. And so everybody got their start. They called it the School of Mulvihill. And growing up, I didn't think anything of it, but all of the guys who were Tony Viners and the guys who were Rogers and head of all these things all got their start in the mailroom at Mulvihill. So growing up, I had actually no idea that was a big deal. I just knew we weren't allowed to change the channel during commercials because my grandpa would say, "That's how we eat." So, fast forward a million years, and I actually wasn't intending to go into radio at all, but I moved back home when my dad was sick, and I needed a couple of jobs, and they were hiring a summer cruiser driver for the new local radio station. And I thought, well, I can do that, drive a 45-foot Winnebago to the Lakefield Fair. Yeah, I can. Hand out some free hot dogs? Sure. And I did that for a summer, and the following year, they called and they needed a new someone to fill in for the mornings. And I thought, well, how hard could this be? Turns out hard. But I thought, it's great. I get to shoot my face off first thing in the morning in the dark. Fun. And I did it for a couple weeks, and then they called and said, do you want to work full time? And which also scared me. Those words always scare me. Full time. Oh, that seems like a lot. But 12 years later, I was still doing mornings, and it was fabulous. And it helped. Like Joel Scott was one of my best friends, and every morning, 5:30 to 9, I would have belly laughs, and it was just like hanging out with my brother, chatting our faces off. It was amazing.
It must have been or I guess I'll ask the question, was it a disruptive lifestyle to have to be up so early?
Yeah, it was like having a baby, but without anything to like give you joy back in a way. It doesn't look like you yeah, I felt hungover for about a decade, but
yeah.
I used to sleep in my car on the way back. So I lived in Toronto for a long time while doing the show, and I would fall asleep around Oshawa, so I'd pull off into a parking lot, and in the winter I had a blanket that plugged into my lighter and a pillow. Yeah, I'd just be out cold. And one day it was about 4:10 in the morning, and I was driving from Toronto to the station, which is on the side of the road near Coburg, and it was a whiteout. I couldn't see anything, and I thought, what am I doing? I'm going to die for this job. And I pulled over, left a message at the station, and put my four-ways on, and I had classical music on, my blankets plugged in, pillow, eye mask, I'm out. And a little knock. It's OPP. And I'm like, oh, hello. Hello. He says, have you been drinking? And I said, no, I'm just on my way to work. And he just explained as I put my eye mask up, it just smells like incense in the car. And he said, well, that's great. You're really responsible, but you've pulled over on an on-ramp. I'm in Pickering, and I am blocking their car, and I am just... It's very, very And there was another time when I was actually got an oil change, and it was at Spilsbury and Lansdowne, the holiday fort there. And I said to the guys, I am dying. I am so tired. I'm just going to go to that little patch of grass, and I'm going to sleep. And they said, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, I got to lie down. And I went in like my purse, and I fell fast asleep on the side, but like between the sidewalk and the road on a patch of grass, drooling out cold. And this woman came by, and she put $5 in my hand. Told me to get something to eat, and I was too tired to say no. I was like, okay. And the next day I told it on air, and Joel's like, I don't believe you. And Holiday Ford called, and they were like, no, man, it happened.
it was a regular paycheck for a long time. And
that part was hard, but no, ownership had changed, and the industry had changed, and it wasn't the same, and the new ownership, I didn't like it very much, and they were really prescriptive about what they wanted us to talk about, and it was pretty misogynistic too. The content even was like, Megan, women want to hear about what to make their kids for lunch, and more celebrity gossip, and I'm like, hang on. So I thought, no, it's not right for me anymore. It's time to go. I wasn't adding anything. It was noise at that point, and I thought, again, it was like going back to school for documentary. Like it has to mean more than this. What am I contributing now? What am I saying? It's just blah, 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 blah. I can't talk about the Kardashians anymore. I have to go.
I think that's a pretty good part of a value system.
Yeah.
When I first approached you about writing a play about the Robinson settlers for the 200th anniversary of the first 9 ships coming, do you have a recollection of what your first thought was about it?
Well, my first thought was, what? I don't think I can do that. And then my second thought was, well, how hard could this be? Turns out, hard.
Really hard.
Really hard. Yeah, I was humbled and I was surprised that you asked me.
Not my idea.
Yeah. She's like, a bit of a regret.
Not at all, but it was interesting. I had gotten a newsletter about Heffernans from Ireland, and I can't find the e-blast I got to this day about the 200th. So this is 2001 range, right? I get this email comes into my inbox about Heffernan family, and I knew them because my grandparents had Artistic and Peterborough as their mail route for 46 years. So I knew Heffernans and McKeevers and Townsends. Like I knew that east side of the Irish over there, of this town. And I don't know why I got this thing, and I thought, oh, we should do something about the 200 that's coming up in 2025. And at a staff meeting, I mentioned it, and Robert Winslow from our theatre said, well, what about, we had just had a very big success with the Veranda Society in 2021. He said, well, what about Megan rating it? And I don't even think, we knew you were Irish, but I don't even think we knew you had a connection that you were a descendant.
Yeah.
And I thought, that actually makes a lot of sense. So it was a kind of a perfect storm of me getting that email that, again, I tried to find it recently. I cannot find it. So I'm like, is it witchy? Did I dream it?
It never happened.
Never happened. So tell me a bit about, like, how did you get to the draft that we have, that we're very close to the play that, you know, people will see a version of it on stage in a few weeks.
It was hot here.
Tell me about what you did to get there.
I procrastinated for a really long time because I didn't know how to start, and I was scared to start. And there are a couple people in the room I have to give major love to. Mary Smith and Dennis Carter-Edwards, who right from the beginning, the minute that there was an announcement in the paper, and then I started to sweat, and then they called and we set up a chat, and they just started giving me information and networking and helping me sort of figure out the story, or putting me in touch with people who could help me figure out the story. And they were so supportive. I am forever indebted for your kindness and all your knowledge. It's been amazing to me. And then I procrastinated more because people started giving me books. Like I literally have finger bins, 3 full of books people have given me, and family stories. And then I felt this crushing
Pressure?
Yeah, that's the word. Of how am I going to get it all in there, and what if I offend anybody, and what parts to focus on, and it's so historically dense, and what if it's not what everybody needs? And I was trying to sort of appeal to every stakeholder, from the deeply committed to the history to those who really want their own family story highlighted, and the Indigenous piece, and I felt a bit paralyzed by it. So what helped was a deadline. Kim gave me a deadline.
Can I just, first of all, I will say that I think the word procrastination is unfair to you. You did copious amounts of research.
Yes.
I understand the research was in service of procrastinating out of fear, But you had done so much research. It was really, like, you have tubs of, of documentation, and people were so generous reaching out to you to support you. I mean, and Mary and Dennis, and Mary especially, I mean, helped you facilitate the trip to Ireland, which I want to talk a bit about, and people to see there.
And introducing me to all of the chiefs and just opening their friends network and trusting me with that. It was
it was interesting. At a certain point, you were 2 years into research and you hadn't written anything yet.
She's not mad at me at all.
and I knew what was happening. Like, I could see the fear, because also you haven't written before this a multi-character play.
No, I've never done this.
The same kind of thing. So there's that paralyzing fear.
Yeah.
And then I was musing it in bed, as I do, and I thought, I think what we have to do is we have to just support her more aggressively.
That is the best way to put it.
To write the play, and I gave you a deadline.
Support her more aggressively. I'm going to start saying that.
So I gave you an October deadline, and then you announced that that's when you needed to go to Ireland.
Yeah.
So I very supportively moved it
to
January. And you delivered a play.
I did.
You did.
I really did.
A full draft, you gave me a first act first, and it was totally on the right track. And then I was like, let's
give
get
it a
second act. Let's wrap her up.
Yeah, that's hard to do too, wrapping it up. So, yeah, I think going to Ireland, even now that I look back in hindsight, I am someone anyway who needs to consume all of the information, and then it has to sit in me. It's like stirring up. You're at a beach and you stir it all up, and then let the silt lie for a minute. I'm that. Give me all the stuff. I'm the cow. I eat the cud. I need to burp it up from time to time. And so I needed all of that time, and I actually needed to worry about making sure I was trying to make everybody happy so that eventually I could get to what I needed to say. Where was I in that piece? Where was my own voice or my own thought? And I think I needed to go through all of that process in order to get to a point where I thought, this is what I need to write. And going to Ireland was so helpful because at that point I needed to put sort of meat on the bones of people. I needed it's nice when everything is a bit precious, but then there's the real people. There's that flesh part. I needed to hear the people talk. I needed the turns of phrase. I needed to touch some old stone buildings. I needed all of that. And that was so helpful. And when I write, I actually write in an accent in my head even. They're kind of talking through me. I talk out loud as I'm writing it. They wouldn't say that. John wouldn't say that. I'm like, John doesn't exist. John can say whatever you want John to say. I'm like, no, I now know him. You wouldn't do that. So it took me a long time to kind of get to that point, but then it started to flow. Yeah.
It flowed beautifully. I think what's interesting too is that you're in this interesting position, maybe one of the most, dare I say, since Robert's played The Cabin Blazers, where there's a spotlight on it in a certain way because there is real our plays are plays, they're works of fiction often based on real events and real people, but at a certain point they aren't reenactments. And we've always struggled with, sometimes we get the letters or the emails from people that, we didn't quite get all the details right. Mm-hmm. And I totally get that. People are so invested, and people who are historians that's their life's work, is those exact things. And our work is a bit like, yeah, thanks for all that hard work you did. Now we're just going to take it from here and make up crap, And that must be, I am very empathetic to the challenge of that in the work. And so I'm very aware of it for you in the work and the pressure you must feel, because in a lot of ways, you're a good girl.
Oh God, yeah. I grew up very Catholic. Yeah. I don't want to hurt anybody ever. It's a lot of time in confession. So I feel that about this play, and yet I'm also at peace with that as well. I'm asking for grace for any historical pieces I might have not gotten right or didn't go far enough with for people, but none of it was done out of malice.
And also, not because you don't know the history. When I read anyone else's history about it, you have got the right history in there when it is needed. in a beautiful way. Like, again, I hearken it the closest to Robert's work on the Cabin Blazers. You just really got it right, Nick.
Thank you.
I think.
Well, and it's hard because the mandate is historical, yes, but it's about entertainment as well. And for me, I love history, but I like the heart of history. I find it difficult to remember facts and who started what war and why, but I will remember one individual's story, and I want to know that all the way to how they felt about it, and that part I can't get enough of. And so for me, writing this in my own voice was getting the historical facts that give the context for this, but I can tell one family's story, but I have to make it up. I have to make up the dialogue. I have to make up the relationships. I have to make up the truth of what I think being a human being would be like between those people, and what might they have said. And they're real people who went through a real thing and have real conflict and real tragedy and real joy. So trying to kind of distill that and make it something that I felt like had a heartbeat for me. And I hope I did that.
I think
we'll find out.
Y'all will be the judge. Do you remember the first thing you wrote when you were looking at the blank sort of computer screen? What was the first thing you wrote?
I wrote out of order in the beginning. And I wrote a scene. So I took a family story, and Paul Hickey, you might know him in town. He owned Outpost 379. He writes a column as well on golf in the Examiner. His family story, and Kim had brought it to me, and then I met with Paul. He was just unraveling a bit of his own family story. He's a Robinson settler and descendant, and his, let's say, 5th great grandmother came over. Her husband was dead, so she came over with her many children, and but there was more to the story of what happened to John Hickey. And there was a lot of resources around that. He'd been a part of the vigilante, the uprising, agrarian uprising against the British and the landlords, and had been arrested. And so there were newspaper articles from the 1820s about this in the Belfast Times. And so I was able to actually get resources and then try to think, okay, this kind of deals with some of the political issues. It deals with what happens here. There's enough drama within that this is a story that I could use as a vehicle to tell some of what was the context of what might have been happening, but within the walls of one family's cottage. And the first scene I wrote was a fight between John and his wife Johanna about that. Because why not start with where the drama is? So I wrote first about, well, he has these allegiances and wants to stand up for Ireland, and can't she see that? Well, you have children, and can't you see that? Well, I love you, but what are we gonna do? But you can't. And I'm like, oh, this is fun. And you just put words in people's faces. I'm like, how fun. And then try to not make anyone too perfect, so add a little something else for them. And so that was the first scene I wrote, and I thought, all right, well, there's something here. How do I put a whole bunch of scenes around it? How do we get to this point?
What was it like writing those multi-character scenes? Because in that scene, of course, you've added all the children in to that scene like that. What was it like to write multi-character for the first time?
It was really hard at first, and then super liberating. And I picture it sort of as well, like, they have, I think, 8 children in real life, historically, but now they only have 5, so sorry.
Yeah, sometimes we have to kill off some of the children. We killed off a bank robber in the Bad Luck Bank Robber. That's the first draft. These things have to happen.
We don't need that many. And so I can't give that many lines.
No.
So
it's a 2-hour play.
Yeah. So I would picture, though, like I was in my mind, it's like I'm sketching a person, I can see them, and then I would erase them. And it's almost like I felt them going, no. I'm so sorry, you can't live anymore. I'm giving that to so-and-so. And actually I've used the town's family have generously maybe allowed me to use their family as well.
Maybe?
Well, they haven't objected outright.
I know, I was like, was there no permission?
Yeah. in their family story. So Nancy Towns is going to be playing one of the roles of Alice Sullivan in the play, who is based on her ancestor as well. So kind of following that storyline as well. And I am making concessions. And I did say to poor Mike when he came to the first reading, I said, well, I'm really sorry, and I hope you forgive me that I took some poetic license and I made your ancestor part of the vigilante group. So sorry. So, I did take some poetic license where necessary. But I did love writing multi-character. I really did love it.
That's great.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you've stayed true to your roots in the piece of the Megan storyteller by creating this character of the Shanachie. So tell us about what a Shanachie is, and then how we made the decision for you to play the narrator in your own play.
Nepotism. Write yourself a part and you're not out of work for the summer, Kim. That's how it works. There's a method to the madness. What did you say? Aggressively supportive? A Shanachie is traditionally an Irish storyteller, and historically they were second only to kings. They were so revered. The Celtic people didn't write down their history, so it was oral tradition. So the Shanachie would sort of be appointed by a community almost. They would rise up in a community, and they would be the history keepers. And they would travel from community to community and share the stories of their own villages and the people and fairy tales and folklore, and kind of they would trade a night's room and board for a night of stories. And that was. And then particularly later when penal laws were enacted in Ireland and people were not allowed to be educated, and so everything did become, they didn't write anything down, and records were burned, and so the oral tradition became such a huge part of their lives. And in my family that was a huge deal, and I didn't know that growing up. I didn't know that that's what our family was doing. My Uncle Claire, my dad, everything was, my Uncle Ken who's here, it was, our dinners were sit around, light a candle, we would tell poems and like, tell more stories, or can you wax poetic about something, and where's the parable and all of this, and I just loved that. I loved it, and I also loved the connection to the Indigenous population who were also of the oral tradition, and that kind of intersection between those two cultures that, and often cultures that are oppressed become cultures of storytelling. To give meaning to their lives. And it became, the Shanachie in the story is a trope for me to help lead the story along that's really complicated. But it also, I think it honors that piece of, it's a little bit Shakespearean of we're all just players on this stage. Like this is just this moment. This is just this time. And when it's done, it's gone. So I like that idea. And I like playing that part because it is me, but not me, too. So I like that.
It seems sort of perfect for you to have written a Shanachie, and then I think it's so perfect for you to play it, because for this community, for so many of us, you are the keeper of stories for lots and lots of us, and for your community, for your family. You are the Shanachie. So I think it's so perfect. It's also a great way for you to, I think, sort of let everyone know that, like the history, like there's a lot of dense history, and the Shanachie is able to move that along with a lot of comedy and taking license and sort of winking at the audience and going, I know I'm taking some dramatic license here, go with me.
Yeah.
I kind of like how you are helping the audience move along with the story. So that
I love breaking the fourth wall. I love it in general. The fourth wall being this, like I like this. I don't want to be just precious. I love that, and I don't know if that's also like the improv thing or that connection, kinetic piece as well. So with my Shanachie, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to break the fourth wall. I want to talk to the people and be like, you're seeing this, right? You got this? Okay, are you with me? All right. And the actors don't get to, but I get to. So there's a little bit of a like nymph fairy thing happens there where I like playing in that land of we're all in this. We make this together because there is no this without this. That is a huge, huge piece.
Yeah, I mean, for me, in my art practice, that relationship between art and audience is at the center of everything we do. So then to see you sort of break the wall and interact with the audience, I think is just so beautiful. I love when characters do that in pieces. You're very much like Puck in some ways from Midsummer Night's Dream in the piece too, right? The character, I think. So you've almost got a draft ready. You had a draft ready, and then something interesting happened that we knew was going to happen. Is that it's hard to tell a settler story right now. We don't want to cause more trauma for Indigenous communities in this country, and that's why the word celebration is not being used, the word commemoration is being used. And we have Patty Shaughnessy, who is also descended from the Sullivans, right? This is the Townsends, and Patty's going to be in the show, playing a couple of characters, as well as is the cultural consultant. So we talk a little bit about that. I mean, very new stuff, but talk a little bit about making sure that we have had Indigenous eyes on the piece and what that has been like for you as a creator.
In my first draft, I kind of shied away from the Indigenous piece. It was in there, but I was very precious. And then after the first table read, and we did a workshop, and Patty was there, and some other folks, Hilary Ware, who are both members of Patty's Curve Lake, and Hilary is Métis.
Yeah, she's at last.
And they told me that I was being too precious. And they said, go further and push this part here and create a character, write an Indigenous character. And I said, all right, if I get canceled, I'm coming after you. So I did. And I wrote a character, and I wrote a scene, and then Patty agreed to vet it for the cultural piece for me, and we did that 2 weeks ago with her, and it was fascinating and so great, and she gave tons and tons of notes and pushed me to go further. And so now I am just working, I'm almost done working that piece of it. So I've actually really loved that, and I was really, really scared in the beginning because I really don't want to offend anybody. And so I was scared even to start this play too, because I felt like it's a hard time maybe it's not time for our stories right now. We've had a lot of time to tell our stories. But there's so many great anecdotal stories and historical documents around the relationship between the Robinson settlers and the Indigenous, and that should also be honored, and we should look at. And even last year it was uncovered that in 1847 the Indigenous tribes, 15 tribes, gave money that amounted in today's dollars to over $15,000 to the Irish who were struggling at the famine. And that had been sort of hidden for so long. And there were lots of, that first winter, the Irish survived with the help of the Indigenous in this area. And it's all anecdotal, because again, two cultures who didn't write things down. And there's some stories that are written down, but I wanted to pay homage to that and to tell the truth as well of what was happening here that allowed for the Irish to come here. Although these were Irish refugees in many ways, it wasn't a great climate here. The land that they were coming to had been taken, and it wasn't within a vacuum that those people came. And I didn't know that story growing up, and I didn't know, and I think there's a way to talk about that and make peace with it. And so I had to balance telling that and setting up that context without it feeling like a lecture or distancing or ostracizing anyone. And so it was quite a challenge, and I hope I have served justice to that.
It was a wonderful note session. It was a wonderful, because Patty had done her work as a cultural consultant and gone through the script, and the moments that there were points of impingement, things like the word surrender. Yeah. And could you change the word? And I said, well, what if? Well, I had it in quotes, like they surrendered their land. And she was like, okay, that makes sense. That'll be okay. So even just going through little bits, but I did work that piece too. Did you? Oh, okay.
Yeah, just wanting to really honor it, and Patty's really interesting because she has a foot in both camps. So it's she's a Curve Lake, but is also a Robinson descendant. So it's kind of an interesting combination.
In some ways, I think she's the perfect cultural consultant for this. Yeah. Because she can really acknowledge that the Irish were colonized by the English. Yeah. and then they came here in some ways unwittingly as colonizers, and yet to incredibly poor groups of people, the first people here, and the Irish coming here with nobody with anything, and so the colonization here, very complicated.
Yeah.
And so it is about just trying to do our best to step carefully and do our due diligence. And I think you've done that beautifully. There's a story you told me once, it's okay to say, about your dad telling you didn't want to go to a party. Remember the story? Yeah, the story.
Yeah.
Will you tell that story? It's going to help me wrap up my part of this. We're going to have questions too, but right.
Yeah, it was my great aunt's 80th birthday party. I was 15. We were going to Toronto. First of all, I came down in like jeans and whatever. And my parents sent me back upstairs to put on a dress. So I came down and I was mad. And I got in our Pontiac 6000 station wagon to drive to Toronto, and I was punishing them silently for making me do this.
You didn't want to go to the birthday?
Didn't want to go to the party, didn't want them to tell me what to wear, they were crushing everything. And I am at this party, and my dad comes up, and I'm sullen. A lot of eye rolling and sighs. And my dad came over to me and put his arm around me, and he said, see the people in this room? These people have fought in wars. They've had jobs. They've been married. They've had sex. All things you've never done. He said, you are the least interesting person in this room. So, why don't you walk around, ask people some questions, and learn something, okay? Good talk. And that has always stuck with me. You are the least interesting person in this room. Go and learn talk to other people, learn something. So.
I think if your dad walked into this room right now, there'd be two things that would happen. First of all, you would have honored that because you have done that for decades. And also, I think in a lot of rooms you're in nowadays, Meg, you are the most interesting person in the room, hands down. And I'm so excited to share Wild Irish Geese with audiences this summer. I can only imagine what it's like that you're giving it off now. Meg's in design meetings and different things, kind of giving the play off, and that's really exciting. And I bet a little bit scary, but we're excited to welcome you all to the farm this summer. But I wanted to see if anyone, before we sort of let Meg go, if anyone has any questions or comments or anything they want to know more about. At the back here and then here. So we'll go there and then,
Hi, I'd like to know when you were writing the play, did you have to think about where it was going to be performed and how to situate people and that kind of thing?
Yeah, good question. When I was writing it, did I think about where it would be performed? Yes, and knowing that it was at Fourth Line, I wrote it differently than I would if it was going to be in a black box theater or proscenium or anything where you could do anything. There can be scenes out in the field. I threw in an animal for Kim to deal with. Aggressively supportive. It's payback. Writing it like that, you can, and writing knowing that there was going to be a big cast, so I could add other characters, and I was allowed to dream big, which was at first really intimidating, but then you think, all right, well, write it and then hand it, and then it's her problem.
And I say that quite often. I mean, because you are the most generous person. You want to solve the problem sometimes,
I
right?
do.
And I'll just be like, you can just leave that one for me.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how I'll do blankety blankety blank blank.
Yeah.
But I'll get there. I'll figure it out. And we have design teams.
Yeah. In stage directions, I would write, and then at certain points, I'm like, is this too much? Is this too prescriptive? She's like, okay, I'll take that out. That's the director's problem. Yeah.
Here and then here. Yeah.
Megan, you talked that Kim mentioned about how much research you had done for this, and you went to Ireland and you've interviewed some of the descendants. I'm intrigued as to why you said it was so difficult for you to write the dialogue, because you had done so much and you'd learned so much about the families. What was making it difficult for you?
Good question. Why was it difficult? Well, there's a big difference between dialogue and drama and history. And people don't talk in a way that is just expositional. So I didn't know how to get the exposition out through interesting dialogue. So how do I set up, unless I have a scene where it's, well, the Irish are coming over and they're doing blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, this is so boring. Like, trying to get these facts out is so boring from two people just talking to each other. So how can I set up the zeitgeist of the world that they're living in through dialogue? So even right now, we might sit down and have a conversation about tariffs and what our lives are like, but it doesn't come out like a history book. It comes out like, I can't believe gas prices. I can't believe whatever it is. So I was trying to think, how do I take all that factual information and make real people say it? And in what way would they say it? So how would I have a couple guys in a pub saying something around, like, I was down at the market and I'm making half of what I made last year. I know, and they've doubled our land. I can't believe it. You can't believe anything. Don't be telling me what I can't believe. You don't know me. And then you keep it. Okay, so I've gotten in a couple of the facts, but I've got in the relationship. How do I build in that these guys are like brothers and can tease each other, but also that they don't have any money? So how do I put that into real relationships? So it was tough at first.
That's hard work.
It's really hard work. And people who are good at writing for fourth line do that well. Rob does it well. I think Alex Posh-Golden does it well. Maya Ardle does it well. I think you're doing it really well because it is hard. It can be dry sometimes. People will do historical plays and they can be dry because they are just doing just the facts ma'am kind of work. Yeah.
Immigration's a difficult story to tell, both then in 1825 and even in today. So how much of that story is going through your mind in terms of the hardships they faced in Ireland, the challenges they faced coming to a new environment, retaining those important props of their culture, and adapting to a new world and a new reality, as immigrants today still face? How much of that, the world we live in today and the challenges immigrants face, was kind of in the back of your mind as you're looking at these people 200 years ago and what they faced?
It's a great question, Dennis. And how much did I take in the idea of immigration? Huge. It was, and it colored a lot of the script. And at the end, I try to talk about that a little bit as well. So I think, and it's interesting because Kim and I were rereading it again a couple months in the last month. And part of the reason that they wanted to populate this area, many reasons, but they wanted the white pine for Navy ships. They'd also just gone through the War of 1812, and they were afraid the Americans would invade again. Isn't that interesting? Wow. And they were afraid they didn't have the population to ward them off. Isn't that interesting? And so I'd written this already a year ago, and then I'm reading it and I was like, oh, well, isn't that prescient? That we just keep repeating ourselves. And we learn and don't learn over and over and over again. And I try to button the play top and bottom a bit with that. We are doing what humans have done for centuries and pretending that we're getting better. Yeah. So,
and the idea of the tax base too. I mean, we talk about how many immigrants do we want here because we have to have enough to work and pay taxes so that we have CPP and OAS and all the things. And they're talking about the same thing then, 200 years ago. I mean, Meg's done such a beautiful job of bringing that in. And, one of the things I talk about when I was thinking about this play was the idea that people coming to a place thinking they want a piece of their own thing, own something of their own, start over. They don't even know that they're on someone else's land. That's not even going in. And yet they're simply puppets in lots of ways for a government that's got its own agenda at the same time.
Yeah, and the idea of the reason I called it Wild Irish Geese is, so the wild geese, it goes back hundreds of years in Ireland. They were often, Irish were hired as mercenary fighters for other wars, and they fought in France, and they fought for other, all over actually. And then sometimes they would stay. There's actually a wine region in France, south of France, called the Wild Geese wineries. And then the wild geese became a term used for anyone who had to leave Ireland as part of the diaspora, because they were constantly having to leave and fly. But yet geese, and I liked the sort of symbolism of Canada and the goose as well, so that these Irish coming here, I liked this little intersection as well. But it was, geese themselves take care of each other, and they can be fierce, but they protect each other, and they always keep a memory of home. And they will fly all for the winter, but they always know where they're coming back, that homing piece to them. And there's something about the Irish that has a staying power. There's something about, part of it is in the oppression, part of it is in the soil. I don't know what it is, but the fact that 50 to 70 million people claim ancestry as part of the diaspora, and the fact that this area has stayed so richly Irish in culture is fascinating to me. What is that heartbeat? Often people come and they assimilate, and they want to kind of become whatever the new thing is, and the Irish do and don't. They love to hold on to that Irishness, and I was fascinated by that idea of what is that? Why am I writing a play 200 years later about my ancestors? That's neat to me. So that sort of, that piece of immigration is in my title as well.
I can just give
we'll just do Mary. We'll come back to you, Dana.
I just want a quick plug.
Yeah.
The New Canadian Centre is hosting a panel discussion on the 1st of May on that very topic.
Oh,
looking at
wonderful.
immigration. So
On May 1st.
I encourage all of you to check the website, get all the details. It will be a fascinating talk.
Thank you.
Mary, you had a question?
I'm wondering, Megan, have you picked up much of the Irish language in this process? And I don't have a good ear for language, and even people with a thick Irish accent, I really struggle to understand what they're saying. So will I be able to understand this play? Is my
Nope.
how do you deal with the language?
Yeah, that's a good question, and also Kim's problem. Yeah, and I mean, it's always funny. When I did my film Murphy's Law, and I had to subtitle the Irish, and when I took it back, I played it in Dublin, and there was this slow turn from everybody in the theater looking at me like, no one at home knows what you're saying. You're like, we're speaking bloody English. Like, are you? So yeah, I think, some people can do the accents, some can't, and that'll be interesting, and we'll work on that. At my turn of phrase, there are some, I really love the juicy Irish saying, like, even when I was over there, I had this amazing afternoon with these 3 Shanachys, 3 older guys. They were all in their 80s. We met in a little town hall, and I just recorded them talking. And I asked them questions about everything from, like, the pig killing to how do you have a dance at the 4 crossroads, how do you do all this stuff? And they would, half the time I had no idea what they were saying, and they had thick Limerick, Tipperary accents back and forth, and I was like, what is happening? And at one point, a fellow was saying, oh God, you go over the road there, it's just rotten with O'Brien's, just rotten with them, I tell you. And I'm telling you, you know that fella there? Well, he was milking outside the bucket. And I said, what? He goes, well, milking outside the bucket. I said, no, having a bit of an affair on the side, milking outside the bucket. I was like, that's good. So in the play, I have done a few of those where I'm like, if people get it, I hope so. If not, I love it. A few of those where like they just say it in a way that we wouldn't, that is so delightful. So there's some of that I hope people just kind of, in a way, it's not, you don't strain to understand it, let it wash over.
And there's a little bit of Gaelic, but not a ton.
No. Yeah.
You've got a little bit of it in there.
Just a couple of words and hints, and the same with Anishinaabe Moen. I put in a little bit to give the hints, because many of these people spoke Gaelic when they arrived. So just a hint, but nothing that is going to strain us. Yeah. I hope so, Mary. If you don't like it after...
I just want to understand.
Well, the one thing we'll know is if Mary doesn't like it, we'll get an email.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. Just send the emails to me.
Yeah.
Leave Meg alone. Everybody. No, I'm just joking. And I was going to say that, Dennis and Mary are part of an incredible group called the 9 Ships group. And I don't know if everyone knows about it, but check out their website. And they are really... they have been instrumental in the commemorations, the 200th commemorations in this whole region. And there's stuff going on in Ireland as well in September, sort of a welcoming the diaspora home, as it were. But their website's extraordinary, and the work they've been doing is amazing, and they are capturing the stuff from Downeyville to Douro and all points in between north, south, east, and west. And I know that all summer, this summer, there are going to be weekend events because I am giving actors permission to be off. So I know there are things happening in Douro and Ennismore and what have you. It's a very, very exciting time. Yeah, and then I think you're going to Ireland, aren't you? Or
Yeah.
Well, you're going to Ireland. You're going to Ireland. I think they're all going to Ireland.
Are you going to Ireland too? Who else is going? Anyone else going? You're going. Oh, right.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's coming.
People are going to Ireland. The diaspora. So we hope the diaspora all comes here, and then goes to Ireland. Are there other questions, comments from Meg? Yes, one here. We'll do one
I just got
more.
a quick question, and it's, I assume that the adult audience is going to really find that they resonate with this, with your play. But I'm wondering what the age would a teenager enjoy your play? Well,
Yes, they would.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Get them out there. Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
I would think we don't at the farm. We don't allow kids under 5 at the farm. They're just
I was
disruptive.
thinking 12.
12's great.
12 is great. It's not. We have an advisory on the first show. We're calling it a mysterious romance. It's a little bit sexy. So we're saying 16 plus on it, but on Megan's show, it's totally. In fact, it's lots of kids in the play, and because of that, I think there's lots to be had for families to.
And
enjoy.
some young characters.
Yeah, young characters. Mikey Hickey is 5 in the play. He's adorable. And my niece is 12. She's in the play as well. She's playing your ancestor.
She's playing Alice
Yes.
Sullivan, right?
And then I get a bit of
Not
poetic
Alice. She's
license.
playing Aaron Sullivan.
Their actual ancestor's name is Johanna Sullivan, but my other main character is Johanna Hickey, so I had to change Johanna Sullivan's name, and I have named her after one of my best friends from Ennismore who passed away a couple of years ago. So I've called her Erin Sullivan, and my own niece gets to play the part, so it's kind of lovely all around. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kim, I have a question for you. Are you going to do the Friday night meet at
Artist
the
talk.
farm?
Friday.
Oh, yes, we're doing, are we doing Festival Fridays Artist Talks? Yes, we are. We have lots of experts coming in.
But
So
they're
we're-
not listed as yet. So when are you choosing?
Oh, I've chosen.
Oh.
I finally rallied Dennis to come. He said no at first. I had like bag on.
You chicken.
He wouldn't.
I had another commitment.
Of course he did, because he's the busiest guy. So yeah, no, we've got, I think we're going to announce them soon. We're close on
Yes,
them, right?
very close.
Yeah.
Okay.
Coming very soon.
Which date to book?
Yeah, we know.
That's
Thank you
great.
for saying it. We're going to get it.
Book on Dennis's night. He's fascinating.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I loved, I was at a Peterborough Historical Society thing, Dennis, and you did the stuff about the ships, the ships rosters. It was so great. Right afterwards, I came back to work and I was like, I gotta get him.
Yeah.
Do a festival Friday. He's so knowledgeable. So first of all, I want to say thank you, Meg.
Thank you.
For taking your
Thank
time
you
to talk.
all. Thank you.
And I want to thank all of you, and I want to let you know the tickets are on sale, and we go into previews July 29th.
Yes, for Wild Irish Geese. Yeah.
31st.
Yeah. So, and we can't wait to see it at the farm. 5 weeks. It is selling really well. Already one night sold out. So don't lollygag.
That's a lot of geese.
That's a lot of geese.
And have a great Western Day. We're so thrilled you're all here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.